When I first met Mark, everything felt like a dream. But even dreams can turn into nightmares when you least expect them. And before I tell you how my fairy tale marriage nearly destroyed me, I have to know, where in the world are you right now? Comment your location because I'm building something here. A community of people who refuse to be anyone's fool. Whether you're listening at dawn with your coffee or late at night unable to sleep, I want you to know you're not alone in this. If my story helps you see the red flags you might be missing, hit subscribe. It tells me there are others out there who understand that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones we should trust least. Now, let me tell you about the man who almost convinced me I was worthless without him. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in the life I'd built over the years. We moved quickly, swept up in the whirlwind of new love, and before I knew it, we were married. I believed in us, in the promise of partnership and shared happiness. But lately, something had been gnawing at the edges of my contentment. A subtle shift I couldn't ignore. It started the night I caught him photographing my bank statements. "What are you doing?" I asked, standing in the doorway of my home office. Mark looked up, phone still in hand, my quarterly investment report glowing on the screen behind him. For a split second, I saw something flicker across his face. Calculation, perhaps guilt, before his familiar smile returned. "Just curious about our future," he said smoothly, sliding the phone into his pocket. "We should talk about consolidating our assets soon." Our assets? The phrase sent an inexplicable chill through me. It began with the little things after that. Mark started asking questions about my finances, casual at first, like wondering about my retirement accounts or the value of my investments. I thought he was just being curious or perhaps trying to plan for our future together. But the questions became more pointed, more frequent. He lingered over the bills I paid, scrutinized credit card statements, and most unsettlingly, talked about our lifestyle in ways that felt calculated. One evening, as we sat across from each other at dinner, he casually mentioned an expensive trip he wanted to take. "We could stay at that 5-star resort in the Bahamas," he said, eyes gleaming with excitement. "I've already looked into the presidential suite." Already looked into it? When I asked how we'd afford it, his response was vague, something about tapping into my savings. That night I lay awake, the glow of the ceiling fan casting shadows on the walls, turning over his words again and again. When had my savings become our emergency fund? The next day I started paying closer attention. I found receipts for luxury watches, plural, fine dining bills for lunches I wasn't invited to, and gifts that seemed extravagant even for a couple newly married. Mark's credit card was racking up charges, many with no explanation. When I asked, he would brush it off with a grin, saying he was just enjoying life. But the enjoyment felt one-sided, as if he were indulging himself at my expense. The breaking point came during a weekend getaway, when he pulled me aside in the hotel lobby, his expression serious. "Sylvia, we need to talk about your finances," he said quietly, glancing around as if the walls might have ears. "I think it's time you consider consolidating your assets. It'll make things easier for both of us." The way he said it made my stomach twist. Easier for whom? I felt like a stranger in my own life, my years of hard work reduced to a ledger to be managed. But it was his next words that truly frightened me. "I've already spoken to a financial advisor. He can meet us tomorrow," without asking me first. That night I sat alone in our suite, the city lights twinkling through the window. I thought about the woman I had been before Mark, the one who balanced budgets, made careful investments, and knew every detail of her financial world. Somewhere along the way I had handed over that control, trusting him, believing in us. But now trust felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. I realized I needed to know the truth. Was Mark genuinely interested in building a life together, or had he married me for my money? The thought was painful, but I could no longer ignore it. And then, in a moment of desperate clarity, I decided to test him. Not with confrontation, but with a quiet experiment. If I pretended to have lost everything, would he stay by my side? Or would his true colors show? It wasn't an easy decision. Deception felt wrong, but so did feeling like a pawn in his game. I began to let slip subtle hints about financial trouble, mentioning unexpected bills, the market downturn, and even the idea that our accounts might be frozen. I watched his reactions closely, noting the flicker of concern that quickly turned to irritation. But what I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. At first, Mark seemed unaffected, as if he doubted my words. But as the days passed and I maintained the facade, his demeanor shifted like a mask slipping. The charm I had fallen for began to fade, replaced by impatience and something darker. A cold calculation that made my blood run cold. He stopped asking about our future in hopeful terms and started questioning every expense, every plan. But it was the phone call I overheard that shattered my heart completely. One afternoon he caught me reviewing our bank statements and asked sharply, "Why are you worrying so much? Shouldn't I be handling this?" His tone wasn't caring. It was possessive, as if managing my finances was his right rather than our shared responsibility. I forced myself to smile to keep the act going even as my heart ached. "I just want to understand where we stand." "Where we stand?" His laugh was bitter. "Sylvia, there is no we if there's no money. Let's be honest about what this marriage really is." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I felt something inside me break. Not just my heart, but my illusions, my trust, my faith in the man I thought I'd married. But I wasn't ready to surrender. If Mark wanted to play games with my heart and my future, then I would play too, and I would win. I found myself replaying the early days of our relationship, remembering how Mark used to listen intently when I talked about my passions and plans. He had seemed so supportive then, so different from the man now fixated on dollars and cents. The contrast was stark, and it hurt deeply to realize that the man I loved might have been drawn not to me, but to my wealth. The tension in our home grew thick. Mark's conversations revolved increasingly around money, how to invest, how to save, how to spend. He questioned every purchase I made, scrutinized my personal expenses, and even suggested selling some of my belongings. It felt like I was losing not just my financial independence but my identity. One evening, I confronted him gently. "Mark, why have you changed? It feels like you're more interested in my money than in me." His eyes narrowed and for a moment I saw something flicker. Guilt, maybe, or annoyance. "Sylvia, don't be ridiculous," he said quickly. "I'm just trying to be practical. We need to secure our future." But I wasn't convinced. The practicality felt like a mask for greed. I wanted to believe there was still the man I married beneath the surface, but I was afraid that belief was misplaced. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I called my closest friend, Sarah, and in a voice barely above a whisper, told her I was facing serious financial difficulties. "I don't know what to do," I said, injecting genuine fear into my voice. "The market crashed my portfolio. I might lose everything." Felt strange, almost humiliating, but I was determined. Mark noticed the change in my demeanor immediately and asked if he could help. I smiled, masking the storm inside me, and said, "I think I've got it under control." But control was exactly what I was taking back. In the days that followed, I carefully orchestrated my performance. I withdrew funds, paid bills late, and acted increasingly anxious about money. Mark's response was more telling than I could have imagined. He stopped planning lavish outings, grew distant, and began making comments about how we needed to tighten our belts. The man who once dreamed aloud about luxury vacations now seemed resigned, even resentful. But it was what I overheard during his phone call that confirmed my worst fears. One afternoon, while he thought I was in the garden, I crept close to his study door and listened to him speaking to someone in hushed tones. "Things aren't looking good," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "She's lost it all. The investments, the savings, gone. I don't know how long I can keep this up. This isn't what I signed up for." My heart clenched, but I remained silent, recording every word in my mind. Each sentence was a nail in the coffin of our marriage. "Maybe it's time to cut my losses," he continued. "Find someone who can actually contribute something meaningful to a relationship." I realized then that my suspicions were true. Mark had married me for my wealth, and now that it appeared gone, his interest was fading. The man I had trusted was slipping away, revealing a side of himself I never wanted to see. But I wasn't ready to give up. This was just the beginning of a journey. A test that would show me not only his true intentions but also my own strength. I would keep playing the part of the woman who had lost everything, watching and waiting, ready to face whatever came next. For now, I was determined to hold on to my dignity, to protect my heart, and to reclaim the power I had unknowingly handed over. The real battle was just beginning, and I was ready to fight for my life on my own terms. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself caught in a strange dance, a delicate balance of pretending and observing, watching Mark's true colors emerge like a slow, unwelcome sunrise. The man I had married, the one who had once whispered promises of forever under starlit skies, was now a stranger whose eyes reflected frustration and impatience rather than love. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. Mark had been pacing the living room for 20 minutes, his agitation growing with each step. "We can't keep living like this," he finally exploded, eyes darting to the unopened bills on the table. "I'm tired of scraping by on nothing. When are you going to fix this?" I looked up from my tea, steadying my voice despite the ache inside. "I'm doing everything I can, Mark. These things take time," he scoffed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not just about time. It's about competence. You're not handling this the way you used to. I don't know what's wrong with you, but this isn't the life I signed up for." The cruelty in his words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't disappointment, it was contempt. I remembered when our conversations had been about shared dreams, not financial strain. Now every word felt like an indictment, every glance a judgment of my worth. That evening I pulled out the photo album from our wedding day, tracing the edges of the pictures with my fingers. Mark's smile in those photos had seemed so genuine, full of hope. I wondered when that had changed, or if it had ever been real at all. I replayed the early days of our relationship in my mind, searching for clues I might have missed. The way he had courted me with thoughtful gestures, the quiet evenings filled with laughter. Had I been blind to the calculation behind his kindness? One afternoon, as I was sorting through old letters, Mark called from the other room. "Sylvia, we need to talk." His voice carried an ominous weight that made my stomach clench. I joined him at the kitchen table, where he sat with a stack of bills and bank statements spread out like evidence in a trial. "Look, I'm worried," he began, but his tone suggested something far beyond worry. "This isn't sustainable. We need to make drastic changes. Sell the house, liquidate your retirement funds, maybe even declare bankruptcy." Bankruptcy? The word hit me like a slap. I nodded slowly, hiding the storm inside. "I understand you're concerned, but these are major decisions. I need time to consider all our options." He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Time is a luxury we don't have. Every day we wait, things get worse. You need to trust me to handle this." But trust was exactly what was crumbling between us. His urgency felt less like concern and more like desperation, but for what? That night I lay awake, wrestling with a mix of sadness and growing clarity. The man I'd married was revealing himself to be someone I barely recognized. Each interaction felt like watching a carefully constructed facade crumble, exposing something calculating and cold underneath. The next day, I decided to test the waters further. I invited Mark to dinner at our favorite restaurant, hoping to see if any remnant of our old connection remained. Over candlelight, I spoke from the heart. "Mark, I feel like we're drifting apart. I don't want our financial situation to destroy what we have." He looked at me, his eyes tired but lacking the warmth I once knew. "I miss how things used to be too," he said, but his words felt rehearsed. "But this financial mess, it's consuming everything. I don't know how much more I can take." I reached across the table, taking his hand. "Then let's face it together. But I need to know you're here for me, not just for what I can provide." For a moment he squeezed my hand, and I saw a flicker of something, but it felt more like performance than genuine emotion. In the days that followed, the tension became unbearable. Mark's frustrations erupted in sharp comments about my inability to manage, and the luxuries I supposedly refused to sacrifice. I felt myself shrinking, retreating into silence to avoid conflict. One afternoon, I found him sitting alone in the study, staring at his laptop with an expression that chilled me. When he noticed me watching, he quickly closed the screen. "What were you looking at?" I asked. "Nothing important," he said, but his defensive tone suggested otherwise. That evening, while he was in the shower, I checked his browser history. What I found made my blood run cold. Searches for how to access spouse's retirement funds, power of attorney for incapacitated spouse, and most damning of all, divorce with significant assets involved. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. This wasn't just about greed, it was a calculated plan. I sat alone on the porch that night, the weight of discovery pressing down on me. I realized I was at a crossroads. I could continue playing the role he expected, vulnerable, dependent, resigned, or I could reclaim my power and confront the truth. The choice scared me, but it also liberated me. I was done being anyone's victim. As I stared into the darkness, I made a silent vow. I would gather evidence, prepare my defenses, and when the time was right, I would reveal not only his true nature but also my own strength. The real battle was about to begin, and this time I would be fighting on my own terms. The day Mark confronted me about our dwindling lifestyle was the day I realized our marriage had become a battlefield where only one of us knew we were at war. I had been sitting at the kitchen table, quietly sorting through a stack of unopened bills, part of my performance, when he stormed in, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "Sylvia," he said, voice low but deadly serious, "we can't keep pretending everything's fine. This act of yours, living like we're destitute, it's driving me insane." I looked up, meeting his glare with what I hoped appeared to be confused innocence. "It's not an act, Mark. This is our reality now." He began pacing like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair in agitation. "No, this is your reality because you're too stubborn to do what needs to be done. You need to fix this. We can't keep scraping by on nothing." His words hit me harder than I expected, but this time I felt something different. Not hurt, but a surge of protective anger. This was the moment I had been building toward, and I wasn't going to waste it. "Mark," I said firmly, standing to face him, "I'm not going to pretend anymore. This is who I am, with or without money. And I'm not going to beg you to stay or accept me." His eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you out of your mind? You want to throw everything away? What about the life we planned, the future we promised each other?" I felt a strength I hadn't realized I possessed flowing through me. That future was built on a foundation I'm no longer sure you ever cared about. I wanted a partnership, not a business transaction. The room fell silent except for the sound of his labored breathing. Then, his expression shifted to something almost desperate. "Fine," he said, his voice turning cold. "If you want to live like this, then so be it. But don't expect me to go down with your sinking ship." For a moment I felt a pang of fear. Losing him would hurt, but I pushed it aside. This was exactly what I had been preparing for. "I'm not asking you to stay," I said quietly, feeling oddly calm. "But I'm also not signing my life away to make you comfortable." Mark's jaw clenched, and he turned abruptly toward the door. Before leaving, he paused, glancing back with a mixture of anger and what looked like genuine regret. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life," he said. "You have no idea what you're doing." As the door slammed behind him, I sank back into my chair, heart pounding but spirit unbroken. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt in control of my own destiny. In the days that followed, I watched Mark's desperation intensify. The man who once dazzled me with charm now seemed trapped, his patience worn thin by a reality he couldn't manipulate. He made frantic phone calls, suggesting increasingly desperate schemes to restore our financial stability. But I remained resolute, refusing to yield an inch. The real revelation came when he arrived home one afternoon with a folder full of legal documents. "We need to discuss power of attorney," he said, spreading papers across the dining table with practiced efficiency. "This would allow me to handle your finances, make decisions when you're overwhelmed." I stared at the documents, noting how thoroughly he had prepared them. "When did you have time to arrange all this?" He avoided my eyes. "I've been thinking about it for a while. Given your current state of mind, it just makes sense." My current state of mind. The phrase was carefully chosen. I realized legal groundwork for claiming I was incompetent. "No, Mark," I said, my voice steady as steel. "I'm not giving you that power. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own life." His mask slipped completely then, revealing frustration and something darker underneath. "You don't understand how hard this is for me, Sylvia. Watching you destroy everything we've built." "Everything I built," I corrected. "And I'm not destroying anything. I'm protecting it." That night, after another heated argument, I made a decision that would change everything. I sat by the window looking out at the star-filled sky and realized I was ready to stop pretending. The next morning I called our closest friends and family, inviting them to dinner. It was time to end this charade once and for all. When they arrived that evening, I could see the concern in their faces as they took in Mark's barely concealed agitation and my own carefully composed demeanor. "Thank you all for coming," I began, standing at the head of our dining table. "I have something important to share with all of you." Mark's eyes darted nervously between our guests, perhaps sensing what was coming. "For the past several weeks," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word, "I've been conducting a test. I pretended to have lost everything, my investments, my savings, my security, to see how the person I married would react." The room fell silent. I could see shock registering on familiar faces, while Mark had gone pale. "What I discovered," I continued, "was that my husband's love was conditional on my wealth. When he thought it was gone, so was his commitment to our marriage." Mark tried to speak, to defend himself, but the evidence was overwhelming. Our friends and family looked at him with a mixture of disappointment and disgust as the truth settled in. "I'm sorry, Sylvia," Sarah whispered, tears in her eyes. "We had no idea." "Neither did I," I replied, "until I was brave enough to find out." In the aftermath of that dinner, Mark's attempts to justify himself grew increasingly desperate. He called, sent messages, even showed up unannounced, pleading for forgiveness and another chance. But I had made my choice. I was done being manipulated. Instead, I focused on reclaiming my independence completely. I met with financial advisors, updated all legal documents, and set clear boundaries. Never again would I allow anyone to treat me as a commodity. Our final confrontation came when he returned to pack his belongings. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said, pausing at the doorway. I met his gaze without flinching. "But you did hurt me, Mark. The moment you decided my worth was measured in dollars, rather than the person I am." As he walked out, the house felt emptier but infinitely freer. I closed the door behind him and took a deep breath, ready to face the future on my own terms. In the quiet that followed, I began to rebuild not just my finances but my sense of self. I reconnected with old friends, embraced forgotten hobbies, and rediscovered the woman I had almost lost. There were moments of loneliness, of course, but they were balanced by a growing confidence. I was no longer defined by my wealth or by the man who had tried to claim it. Instead, I was defined by my resilience, my courage, and my refusal to be anything less than whole. This chapter of my life was ending, but I had learned its most important lesson. I had reclaimed my voice and with it my power. The silence that followed Mark's departure wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. Without his constant presence overshadowing my thoughts, I felt a strange mixture of relief and anticipation, as if I had been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. I began immediately to secure my future, both emotionally and financially. My first call was to my attorney, not just to begin divorce proceedings, but to ensure every aspect of my financial life was protected from any future manipulation. "I want ironclad protections," I told her. "No one should ever be able to access my assets without my explicit, documented consent." Each signature on the updated documents felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that I had unknowingly surrendered. Friends and family rallied around me in ways that reminded me what genuine love and support looked like. Unlike Mark's conditional affection, their presence was steady and unconditional. I shared my story openly, not seeking pity but affirming my resolve to never again mistake manipulation for love. Yet healing wasn't linear. Mark's absence left an unexpected void, not because I missed him, but because I had to confront the woman I had become during our marriage. In trying to please him, I had compromised parts of myself that I was only now rediscovering. I returned to painting, a passion I had abandoned when Mark complained it was messy and unproductive. My first painting after his departure was abstract, swirls of dark blues giving way to brilliant golds and whites. I called it Liberation. Joining a book club introduced me to women who valued ideas and conversation over bank accounts. Our weekly discussions became a highlight, filled with intellectual stimulation and genuine laughter. But the most significant change was internal. I found myself speaking up more, setting boundaries with clarity rather than apology. When a persistent salesman called repeatedly, I didn't hesitate to tell him firmly, "Remove my number from your list immediately." When a friend suggested I might be too harsh in my judgment of Mark, I calmly replied, Protecting myself isn't harsh, it's necessary. Therapy helped me understand that forgiveness didn't mean excusing Mark's behavior. It meant releasing the anger that was taking up valuable space in my heart. My counselor helped me see that I had been strong all along. I had simply forgotten how to use that strength. One afternoon, while organizing my financial documents, I found myself smiling. Not because of the numbers on the page, but because I understood completely what each investment meant, where every dollar was allocated, and how my financial future was unfolding according to my plans. The phone rang and I saw Mark's name on the caller ID. For the first time, I didn't feel that familiar twist of anxiety in my stomach. I declined the call and immediately blocked his number. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I hosted a dinner party, not to celebrate an ending, but to celebrate a beginning. As I looked around the table at faces filled with genuine affection and respect, I realized that I had gained something invaluable, the knowledge that I was enough, exactly as I was. To new chapters, I said, raising my glass, and to the wisdom that comes from writing them ourselves. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but mine to shape. I was no longer the woman who had questioned her worth or feared standing alone. I was a woman who knew her value and refused to let anyone diminish it. As the evening wound down and my guests departed with warm hugs and promises to gather again soon, I stood in my doorway watching them leave. The house behind me was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was full of my own presence, my own choices, my own power. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the solid wood against my back. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, new adventures, perhaps even new love. But this time, I would approach it with open eyes and an uncompromising sense of my own worth. The woman who had once tested her husband's love, by pretending to lose everything, had discovered that the most valuable thing she possessed couldn't be measured in dollars. It was her own unshakable sense of self. And that, I knew, was a treasure no one could ever take away.